In this presentation, I want to discuss the psychological basis of the rule of law. What does that mean? Simply put, I mean by that the assumptions about human psychology which make it possible for the rule of law to remain stable over time. In my work, I start with a famous Italian thinker, Cesare Beccaria. Beccaria argued that for a legal system to be legitimate and stable, it should be built on clear general rules by legislators and applied impartially by judges. Judges ought not to interpret the law, but simply apply it. Why? Because interpretation introduces personal opinions and risks turning the rule of law into arbitrary rule. Behind Beccaria's institutional model lies what I call a specific psychological theory, even if Beccaria himself never explicitly states it. According to Beccaria, people are motivated by three main psychological forces. The principle of tradition, first. People tend to repeat what they have done before. Habits are comfortable, they make life easier because they reduce the effort of thinking. People often accept unjust systems, not because they believe in them, but simply because they are used to them. Second, the principle of the love of liberty. People care deeply about their own freedom. Even if they do not always use their freedom, they dislike losing it. However, they are willing to accept restrictions if these are clearly necessary to protect their overall liberty. Third, and finally, the principle of despotic domination. People like their own freedom, but they do not naturally respect the freedom of others. In fact, they often enjoy exercising power over others. Without clear rules, people tend to dominate each other. According to Beccaria, these psychological traits explain why general rules and impartial courts can create a stable and just society in the long run, at least. General rules protect individuals from the domination of others and from the risk of arbitrary dominations. They channel people's self-interest in defending their own liberty while controlling their tendency to oppress others. However, I believe that Beccaria's view of human psychology, while powerful, is both too pessimistic and, in a sense, too optimistic as well. It sees human beings as creatures of habit, selfish in defending their freedom and eager to dominate others. This may explain why rules are necessary, but it does not fully explain how people can learn, grow, and improve their judgments over time. This is where my alternative proposal comes in. I call this alternative institutional experimentalism. Like Beccaria, I believe that the separation of powers and general rules are essentials. But I think they must be grounded in a different and richer understanding of human psychology. My idea is based on something that Rawls calls the Aristotelian principle. This principle says that humans are not just creatures of routine or selfish defenders of their own freedom. Instead, humans are fundamentally progressive beings. We seek to grow, to develop our abilities, to understand more, and to refine our judgments. Importantly, we develop our values by experimenting with different ways of acting and thinking. From this idea, I build a different psychological basis for the rule of law. I argue that human beings are a personal, but not necessarily selfish, interest in protecting the freedom of others. Why? Because the freedom of others creates the space we all need to learn and grow ourselves. If others are free to question us, to propose alternatives, to criticize rules, then we have an opportunity to develop better judgments and more refined values. Our own personal growth depends on living in a society where other people can challenge and enrich our own perspectives. In this alternative model, the purpose of legal rules and institutions is not only to protect people from domination, as Beccaria thought, but also to create spaces for collective learning. I see the rule of law, then, as a kind of an ongoing public experiment. Laws are not the final truth. They are provisional solutions that should be tested, evaluated, and revised over time based on experience and public reflection. This is why I believe that political legitimacy should be understood in experimental terms. A legitimate government is one that treats its laws as hypotheses to be tested, not as dogmas to be obeyed. From this experimental system to work, institutions must allow the formation of what I call publics. A public is not simply a group of people who follow the same rules. A public is a group of individuals who recognize that their actions affect others and who come together to reflect on and evaluate those effects. In this sense, a public is a space for dialogue, for shared inquiry, and for collective learning. Institutions should be designed then to foster publics, not masses where individuals act without coordination, nor peoples where individuals merge into a single collective identity. In conclusion, the key difference between Beccaria's model and my proposals, which is called institutional experimentalism, is mainly psychological. Beccaria relied on a view of humans as habitual, selfish, and potentially despotic beings. I argue instead that humans are also progressive and experimental creatures who seek personal development through interaction with others. Protecting the freedom of others is not just a moral duty imposed from above, it is a condition for our own personal growth. Thus, the rule of law should not only be a system of clear and impartial rules, but also a dynamic and revisable framework that allows individuals and societies to learn, reflect, and improve over time. In short, Beccaria gives us a powerful institutional model. But to make sense of its long-term stability and legitimacy, we need a richer psychology. We need to see human beings not only as defenders of their own liberty, but as learners who depend on shared spaces of freedom and dialogue to realize their potential. This, I believe, is a true psychological foundation of the rule of law.